They cannot do it.
So, when somebody writes in their offer commissions to be 3.2 to 1.15, right in the addendum, is that correct or not then?
I'll get there.
Okay.
I'll get there. Okay, so let me start by just making it clear that the 20.1 that everybody else on the other side of the mountains, all the way to the East Coast, deal with is they cannot negotiate it, period. Okay? We disagreed with that. I was there at the time, fought this. I disagreed with setting this kind of a standard up within our code of ethics. Fortunately, our board supported me in that, and so did the lawyer, and we fought with Korea back and forth. And to make a long story short, the decision was that you guys are on the other side of the Rocky Mountains. Absolutely nobody else knows you're even here. You're hiding over there. You know, we don't want to fight with you anymore. So guess what? We'll let you have an exception to the rule. And nobody else will even find out if they don't listen to you anyway. So they don't know we're here. So now we go to the 20.1 that BC has. And that's why it's very important when you look at the Code of Ethics and Standards of Practice that you have the BC version. Okay? Because this is the big change. So if you look in the gray box, our 20.1 reads a little bit differently. It says that when negotiating on behalf of a buyer, a realtor, when negotiating on behalf of a buyer, may only use the terms of an offer to purchase to modify the listing broker's offer of compensation to cooperating brokers if A, the buyer has authorized the realtor to do so in a separate written document, and B, there has been prior consultation regarding the compensation between the realtor and the listing broker. So you can see it's very different than the previous one we talked about. So, what happens? When you have, let's say, a buyer agency agreement, and it has a specific commission amount agreed with the buyer. Let's just say, for argument's sake, it's $5,000 and you're being offered $3,000, whatever the number may be. Now the buyer has agreed to the $5,000. And of course, you've already told them in advance that most cases you will be paid by the seller. And in fact, in some cases, you may be paid more by the seller. All of that is fine. But you are expecting that to be the minimum that you will be receiving, or your brokerage will be receiving. Okay? So I remember what, for me, working day and night on a transaction. Of course, when you're going on holidays, all of a sudden the buyer comes to town and wants to buy right away. We all know what that's like. And it's crazy, right? So you're going nuts and you're running like crazy, and then what happened? Well, I ended up selling them a property that was perfect for them at substantially less than I was expecting. So, of course, I'm very frustrated. I'm angry. I'm upset. I'm upset at the listing agent. I'm upset at the seller. I'm upset at the world, right? Because I did so poorly after working so long and hard, right? So I came to realize in myself that I had to decide what would be the minimum amount of compensation I could live with. Come home at night, feel good about what I'm doing. You know, I've said many times, and I don't know if I've said it here before, but you know, my real estate for 27 years and doing all of this, and my kids growing up, and my wife, and she's saying, you know, I understand the business you're in, we support you, great, we realize you're out there working hard and all of that, but if you're going to put in those kind of hours, and you're going to put in that kind of work, for crying out loud, at least bring home the money, right? Like, let's not be broke while you're doing all of that, right? I mean, it doesn't make a lot of sense. And, you know, I understood that. So it came a point in time where I said, you know what? I will go out and break my butt, but this is the minimum amount that I need. Okay, so whatever that number is, you decide. You know, if it's 20,000 or 2,000, I don't care. You decide what the minimum amount is. So then I go to a buyer agency contract and I establish that. And every one of my buyers has always said to me, I understand you have to make a living. Right? I don't expect you to work for free. So I would go and I would say, and in my case, it something like $4,000 or $5,000, I said, I will work for you, but that is the minimum. So you must be sure that I get that. I will likely get more. I will likely get that covered by the seller. Don't have to worry about it. So what did that do? Most people seem to feel that that scared them, and they may want to run off to another realtor who won't require that of them. But I actually found quite different than that. Because what it did was it absolutely freed me up to absolutely for sure work only in their best interest. So it didn't matter if it was a for sale by owner. It didn't matter if it was a commission that was substantially less, like $500 or $100 or whatever it may be, if we run into that these days. Didn't matter, because I knew that that was the minimum, so I could work my heart out and have absolutely no bias as to what I was showing them or what I was going to explain to them as being in their best interest. So with that in mind, I can go forward. So now, having done that, we come back to this. If I walk into a situation and we write an offer on a property where they're offering something less than what we had agreed to, how do we handle that? Well, obviously, the seller could make up the difference. That's one option. Okay? Or, pardon me, the buyer, I'm sorry, could make up the difference. That's one option. Right? But what we were realizing is sometimes the buyer has to come up with that lot of cash out of his pocket or out of his over and above his transaction. Not too excited about that. So is there the other option? Yes, there is. This is where 20.1 in BC comes into effect. Provided you have a direction from your buyer separate from the contract, then you can have it written into the contract. If you have it written into the contract, it becomes part of the transaction. So at this point, we got to talk about a couple of things for those of us that have been around a while. You new folks probably won't have any issue with this whatsoever because you're not used to the way it's always been. But we used to talk about what we call third-party contracts. And we would say you can't put your negotiation of commission into a contract, because that makes it a third-party contract. Okay? And a third-party contract, as we know by law, is not enforceable. And what is a third-party contract? If I was to put in there that the seller will negotiate with Home Life a commission of this amount, in other words, make the third party draw me into the picture, if they were to do that, that would be a third-party contract. That is not what's happening here. What's happening here is the buyer and seller are negotiating this contract, not me. I'm fine. I've got a buyer agency contract. I've got the minimum amount covered. I'm fully protected one way or the other. I am not party to this contract. It is the buyer that is going to be obligated to pay me. It is the buyer that wants to negotiate the extra amount of money they're going to have to pay by buying this house in their contract. So the contract is clearly between the buyer and the seller only. And what they have done is they are going to put a term in their contract that says they will pay Home Life Realty out of the proceeds of sale upon completion X amount of dollars to Home Life Realty, period. And it's a term of their agreement. So let's say, for example, you're writing a contract on a particular house. And one of the things that's a problem is, the fence is falling down. So, and let's just say the carpets are filthy and it's smelly and they need cleaned. And there's maybe 2 or 3 things like this. So the buyer says, okay, I will buy this house, but I require a term of this contract to be that you will get the fence fixed before I take possession on this property, and that you will have the carpets cleaned and properly sanitized before I take possession. Can they do that? Mm-hmm. Of course. They can put in anything they want as a term of their agreement, right? They can also say that is a term of my agreement with you, the seller. I will buy your property at this price on this date, provided you fix the fence, clean the carpets, and pay X amount of dollars out of the proceeds of sale to Home Life Realty. It's a term of the agreement between them. Nothing to do with me. I'm already covered. I'll get paid whether they get it or they don't. So it's clearly the buyer that's going to be obligated. Because if they were buying a different house, they wouldn't have had to pay that. But because they're buying this house, they will. It's therefore a cost of purchasing, and they are going to factor that into their negotiation with the seller, and they have every right to do that.